Hello, viewers. This is Kawachima, and today I thought to talk with Mr. Kamran Bokhari. Mr. Kamran Bokhari is an intellectual. He works with the Center for the Global Policy in Washington, D.C., and he regularly appears on global press, global media, and he continuously writes for the newspapers on the issues of international relations. So I requested him to talk about this ongoing developments in South Asia. Thank you very much, Mr. Kamran Bukhari, for your time.
Thank you, Kamar. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Mr. Kamran Bokhari, my first question is regarding what is happening here in India, Pakistan. You know that since last August, when Prime Minister Modi and his government changed the constitutional status of Jammu and Kashmir and Ladakh. So how do you see, while sitting in Washington, the development in South Asia, particularly today, when once again Prime Minister Modi is touching and is continuously in touch with his right-wing Hindu constituency, which is supporting him, and above all, how do you see this entire situation in India and Pakistan?
Well, thank you, Kamar. To start off, Prime Minister Narendra Modi isn't an exception. Anybody who is a populist leader, we see this with Viktor Orban in Hungary. Some would argue that President Donald Trump in the United States is doing the same thing. Definitely Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in Israel. These are all populist leaders, and they their support base is based on a right-wing significant segment of their respective populations. So when you ride on their shoulders and achieve electoral success, then there's a certain amount of, if you will, delivery that has to be made. One could say the same thing for Prime Minister Imran Khan in Pakistan. He has appealed to a broad section of center right, right of center population, where he has to deliver. You win, and then the question is, how do you bridge the gap between what you promised in the election and deliverables in terms of policy? So I think that's what's happening here. Now, to be very specific about the revocation of the status of the autonomous status of Kashmir, I would like to point out that it's very clear that this was a rushed matter, both from a domestic political point of view and a, if you will, a foreign policy point of view. And let me explain both. So domestically, because he has the majority in parliament, he was able to revoke that status through a parliamentary vote. Now, some would argue, and I think rightfully so, is that that's not the constitutional way to do it, because the legislative assembly in the former state of Jammu and Kashmir should have been asked to be involved. It needed to ratify that. That's my understanding of it. I could be wrong, I could be right, but that's my understanding. But that didn't happen. So you've moved away from a situation that wasn't so great to a situation where you don't really have like a normalization strategy. How do you normalize this? The large parts of the former state of Jammu and Kashmir, which is now the union territory of Kashmir and Ladakh. So they have not been, the lockdown has not been lifted. You don't have people expressing, there's no politics going on in this area. So how long can you keep this up? Yeah, you can shut down the internet, you can keep a lot of security forces, you can beef them up, but this is unsustainable for even a superpower like the United States. And we're seeing that, in the unrest in the United States, that it's not possible for security forces to use just, force to keep people down. You have to allow for a certain degree of freedom. Now, the mainstream political parties in Jammu and Kashmir, like the National Conference of Omar Farooq Abdullah and his father and grandfather, well-established political force, they've been alienated and marginalized. Same thing for the former partner of the BJP, I think it's called the People's Democratic Party of Mehbooba Mufti. So what's happening there? You're not allowing them. You've alienated the mainstream, the ones that said, okay, as long as we have an autonomy within the Indian Union, that's fine, and we can expand upon that. They're gone, so you're not leaving room for mainstream politics. So that's part one. Part two is the foreign policy aspect. This move was made with keeping in Pakistan in mind. How do you deal with Pakistan? Well, this is a way to deal with Pakistan, and therefore it was Pakistan's specific move, the annexation and then the bifurcation of the old state of Jammu and Kashmir. They didn't calculate that India would that China would get involved as well. There was a serious miscalculation, and now that has led to the loss of territory in Ladakh along the line of actual control. That's putting a lot of pressure on the Modi government. So that's where I see it from an Indian point of view, or from a strategic read of what's happening inside India.
Okay, that's good. You are making good sense that here the populist leaders everywhere doing, even the if I go to the Turkey, Recep Tayyip Erdogan is doing the same, and such kind of evidences are available. Now, Mr. Kamran, the interesting question which I want, well, since you are sitting in Washington and my audience here in Islam, in India and Pakistan would be interesting to know this, that India has taken the Kashmir issue from international level to the bilateral level, and now from bilateral level to the unilaterally. They have changed the status of the Kashmir. So, somehow they have been able enough, and they were comfortable enough to manage the global audience, and particularly to the United Nations and to the great players in this in international forum. So, how do you see that? Why international community remains silent when India is moving and a disputed territory, an international issue? Just taking it that this is a domestic or internal issue of India?
Well, a couple of reasons. One is that there is no shortage of problems that great powers have to deal with, especially in the age of COVID. And even when COVID was not around, we still had an issue with just how much attention can you pay to an issue like Kashmir. Okay, the United States has two, if you will, strategic outlooks when it comes to South Asia. Number one, the withdrawal from Afghanistan. So that's the most important thing that takes precedence, that takes priority. The conversations between the Trump administration and the Taliban leadership are in a very advanced stage. We all know about that. So that's one. Number two, it has to do with China. And the United States has been hoping that India would prove to be a partner in its efforts, in U.S. efforts to counter China. Now, that's not the only, tool in the toolbox of the United States, i.e. India. There are other ways for the United States to deal with China, but getting India aligned with Washington's strategy is helpful. Now, what has happened with the clash on the line of actual control in Ladakh has really given, a pause to the American thinking. You have to assume that American policymakers are looking at this and saying, okay, so, if India doesn't seem to be that effective of a partner, we may have sort of jumped the gun here in terms of, relying on India. This is a work in progress. We can't expect India to be a robust partner when it comes to countering China. So those are the two issues. And if that's what the United States is thinking, and then every other power is secondary, then quite frankly, and to the misfortune of the people of Kashmir, is that really nobody's paying attention to their plight, and there's just no interest.
You are absolutely right. I think the global community has its own dimensions for looking this, particularly India and Pakistan, and this issue. Now, Kamran, you have been working on this. You have written as well on this religious politics. So, I have my question is regarding that. We believe that since 2014, India is trying to change its social contract, and India is moving towards from a secular country to a Hindu nationalist country. So, just today, you have seen that Prime Minister Modi has inaugurated a new temple and Ram temple, and they believe that the temple is being built on a 16th century mosque which was destroyed back in 1992. So do you think that this shift of India from a secular to a Hindu religious state, the Indians can absorb this and Indian social contract will remain intact?
I'm not convinced that right-wing Hindu nationalism can completely supplant secular India, or the secular Republican India that existed prior to the rise of the BJP. I think that there's that to undo that, you need far more time, and you actually need to demonstrate that this ideology can take care of the social, political, economic needs of people. Look, I mean, I take a dim view of ideology. It has its limits. It can bring people to power, but then once what a lot of people call catastrophic success, when you actually succeed, when you were not expecting to succeed, the question is, okay, now what? Now I'm in power, now I got to deliver. Now I have to take care of all those promises. Ideology carries you only so much forward. You need to take care of the material interests of the people who brought you to power. So I am not convinced that the BJP and right-wing Hindu nationalism will completely supplant traditional secular Indian values. It's definitely now more competitive. It's a force to be reckoned with, but we just have to wait and see. I mean, look, if economic problems of India continue, I don't see a reason why the Indian voter will be so enthusiastic about Hindutva or Prime Minister Modi or anything that the party stands for in terms of rhetoric when they don't see anything in practice. So we're seeing a similar thing on the Pakistani side of the border. There was so much enthusiasm for Prime Minister Imran Khan when he came to power. Now, when the rubber has met the road, people are taking a much more sort of, realistic view of what can be achieved. There was a lot of euphoria, and it dies down. We're seeing the same thing in the United States. Look at President Trump's numbers. I mean, so populism ideology can only exist if there is a parallel policy track that is successful. You mentioned Prime Minister Erdogan. He's having the same problems, maybe not at that same level. And this is why you have, the Hagia Sophia, turning into a mosque again, all of these things in the hope that he can buy himself some time before the economy can be made better. So certain things are not in the control of politicians. Politicians are trapped, in geopolitics.
True, definitely. You believe that it's not going to happen that swiftly. But my other question is related to this transformation which is going on in India, and that is recently the U.S. Commission for International Religious Freedom released a report, and they said that India is a country of a particular concern. So the religious minorities are under increasing assault in India. Do you believe that the Prime Minister Modi's policy towards the marginalizing the minorities and mainstreaming Hindus is being internationally recognized as something, a shift in the global opinion, not mainly in the opinion of the global leadership, but somehow the think tanks or the non-state actors are looking that there is some shift in India?
Definitely. I mean, look, people are used to an India that was secular. People are used to an India that was not right-wing and was not suppressing its minorities in the way it is doing right now. Obviously, there's going to be a response. The United States Commission on International Religious Freedom, USIRF, is going to take note. And so that's going to happen. But I think that we need to wait and see how this plays out. I don't think that this is a permanent phenomenon. Again, I want to repeat that. I think that this is the moment we live in right now. Does it mean that there's going to be communal tensions and violence? Absolutely. The risk is very high. That's what is being noted by the international audience, if you will. The reaction to that is, okay, this is the world's soon-to-be most populous country, and it'll surpass China in terms of sheer population. And its neighbors to two other large countries by population, Pakistan and Bangladesh, and then you have China next door. So there are geopolitical implications of what is happening in terms of the hard right shift or pendulum swinging to the hard hard to the right in India. But I think that that's where we are right now. In the end, I do believe that ideology is balanced by, even the most ideological of actors with pragmatism. I mean, let's just look at the largest minority in India, Muslims. So numbers say there are anywhere between 180 to 200 million people. That's almost the size of Pakistan, the entire population of Pakistan. No government in India can expect, no matter how ideological they may be, to think that they can just suppress that and get away with it. They know that they have to deal with this, but because of how you get elected and how you have to do policies, it's a constant balancing act. And again, Modi isn't the only politician caught between these two dynamics.
Okay, so you believe that the pendulum is moving, and definitely there are going to be the implications. Now, Mr. Kamran, I have another question, and that's you in your initial answer. You spoke about China. So, how do you think that the Chinese are trying to encircle India? There is a perspective that Nepal has released its own political map. Recently, the Chinese foreign minister brought Pakistan, Afghanistan, and Nepal to discuss the COVID-19. And now that they have got Iran on their side by having some $400 billion bilateral, an agreement of some investments in Iran. So do you believe that after this post-Galwan incident where Indian soldiers were killed, the China is going to be tough on India?
Well, look, I don't think it's an encirclement of India per se. I think this is a tactic. The strategy is bigger. China is flexing its muscles all across its periphery, starting from North Korea, going down to the Straits of Taiwan, to the South China Sea, all the way to the Indian Ocean basin and beyond. And India is one part of it. So I think foreign policy imperatives of China converged with the need, with what India did in terms of annexing Kashmir, and it provided the moment for China to push into India. It's kind of like a chessboard. The Americans and the Chinese are sitting on that chessboard, and they're looking at Huawei, 5G, South China Sea, and the list, the whole gamut of problems that exist between Beijing and Washington. And all of a sudden, Beijing makes a move in an unexpected way that, frankly, nobody was expecting, not just the Indians, but also the Americans and the Pakistanis, that they would actually, push along the LAC in such a forceful manner. So I look at it that way. The Iranian deal that you just referenced, it's not done yet, but one has to assume, given what how the Chinese are operating in the Eurasian landmass, that they will, to a certain extent, forge a strategic deal with the Iranians. The Chinese and the Russians have a strategy, leverage all the issues that create more problems for the United States and use them to their full maximum. That's what they're trying to do. So this is China not encircling India, but challenging the United States.
Okay, that's great. This is one perspective coming from Washington. Coming back to this Kashmir issue, do you believe that since last 1 year, Pakistan has been working a lot to raise the Kashmir issue once again? I personally believe, I have been myself talking that Pakistan didn't have a consistency on Kashmir issue for quite a long time. But now for last 1 year at least, Pakistan has taken this Kashmir issue at global level in an unprecedented way. So do you believe that is it going to help Pakistan in some way in internationalizing Kashmir issue, particularly in this last 1 year I'm talking?
Yeah, I think that the last 1 year is a case of too little, too late. I think that one of the sort of Pakistan kind of axed its own foot when it took the uprising, the 1989 uprising in Indian Kashmir, and inserted Islamist militant groups and backed that, and sort of if you will, jihadized the Kashmiri national struggle for self-determination. That really, it worked for a while. All the way to Kargil, and then 9/11 happened, and the whole project blew up in Pakistan's face. and now we're seeing Pakistan trying to get out of the FATF quagmire because of that. And so that's not an option. And I think, Musharraf Zaidi had an article, I think, the other day discussing this in the news, where Pakistan's options are very limited. So if this is what you've been doing for the longest time, that was your strategy, then you can't really shift gears too quickly. And then Pakistan has severe economic issues. And quite frankly, the question is, what is it that Pakistan can do? There is no military option. Financially, what can Pakistan do to support the Kashmiris? Let's say Pakistan was in a better financial situation. Do they have access to Kashmir, the Kashmiris inside India? India, it's under lockdown. I mean, the Indians have isolated that area from the rest of the world. It's very hard to get there. So I think it's more about creating awareness. And I think that my father used to be a Pakistani diplomat at one point. He's 92 years old. And I remember those days in the 70s and, maybe even the 80s, where Pakistan's diplomacy was far more effective. Now, I think that the last 30 years, Pakistan's diplomacy has taken a real plunge. And I think that needs revival. There needs to be reform in order to be able for Pakistan to play an effective diplomatic role. I mean, this is the same Pakistan that mediated between the Nixon administration by facilitating Henry Kissinger's visit to China and, Nixon going to China and that whole, détente between the US and the Chinese. But now, unfortunately, Pakistan's diplomacy isn't what, it used to be. So I think there's a lot of homework that needs to be done.
Okay, but one last question is about this multilateral global order. We have seen that how this multilateral global order is shaking and how it has scrambled since President Trump is in office. And do you believe that although the international community is silent, great powers are silent, multilateral global forums are silent, don't you believe such kind of issues should be highlighted? And at the end, what options will you suggest to the government of Pakistan for mainstreaming the Kashmir issue further?
I think, look, if you're going to convince anybody to join your cause, it doesn't have to be, Pakistan, it could be any country, and you're asking a great power, be it the United States, Britain, or someone else, to join your cause, then it has to be in their interest. Interests have to align. There are no free lunches in this world, and especially in geopolitics. So, doing favors is one thing, giving a statement is one thing, but really putting your foot behind it, there has to be an interest. And you have to have leverage with great powers in order to say, okay, you know what, this is important, and here's why you need to get involved. Pakistan has not been able to make that case, and it also depends on who you're competing with. Quite frankly, from a US point of view, there's far more that India has to offer than Pakistan has to offer. This is just sort of the reality. It's not, I'm not, making a subjective inference or a statement in any shape or form. I'm just telling you how things are viewed from Washington. There is a reason why there is a civilian nuclear deal with the Indians and not with the Pakistanis. And I think that a lot of Pakistani analysts and leaders have criticized sort of a transactional view, an American transactional view of Pakistan. And that's correct. But I think there's a need to go beyond that and say, okay, how can we go from a transactional view to a strategic one? And the onus is on Pakistan to do that.
Okay, definitely, you are right that at international forums, the interests have to be aligned. Otherwise, things are not going to move forward. And unfortunately, our interests are not aligned with the global community much to take Kashmir issue further. Mr. Kamran Bokhari, thank you very much for your time. It was a candid discussion, and he was giving his perspective while sitting in Washington, that how Washington or the global think tanks are looking at the situation in South Asia, particularly India and Pakistan. Mr. Kamran, thank you very much once again, and we will definitely have you one more time sometime to talk on South Asia. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Kamran.